Hello, welcome everyone. We are so glad you are joining us today. Welcome. Welcome to our panel on pursuing the MBA from a non-traditional background. What we'd like to do today is talk about you and your potential journey to the MBA and possibly the MBA here at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. And so I'm going to ground us in just a quick introduction to the program here. And then we're really going to turn things over to our panel of current students and alumni. I'll kick us off with a couple of questions, but really we will be relying on you today to drive the conversation. We want to answer your questions, especially for those of you thinking about making a pivot in your career or maybe accelerating your career and are trying to identify if an MBA is going to help you get there. So we are going to do our best to get to all of that today. And we'll try to do that all in just about an hour. All right, so as I said, this day and this time that we're spending together is really all about you and how we can help you get to where you want to go next. And so when we think about you and the backgrounds and perspectives of all of the students who join us at Stanford, it's important to remember that every single individual who's joining us in the community at the GSB is bringing a unique perspective and experiences. And that comes from your academic background as well as your professional background. So we threw up just a couple of stats here so you can get a quick snapshot of one of our more recent class profiles. These numbers change every year, but as you can see, there's over 100 different undergraduate institutions and almost 300 different organizations that our students have been a part of before they start at the GSB. So when you think about a class of a little over 400 students, those are a lot of really unique individual voices and perspectives that are in the classroom. And there are so many different journeys that happened before the GSB. And we're wondering what yours are going to be. What could your journey to the GSB look like? And so with that in mind, we'd like to do a little walk through the journeys of these four individuals who have so generously joined us today. So we're going to kick things off with a quick introduction of our panel. They're going to share their names, where they joined the GSB from, and a little bit about their pre-GSB employment and professional experiences. And then we're going to jump into some questions about how they made the decision to come to business school and whether or not that was worthwhile for them. So with that, Khalil, I think we'll start with you.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Khalil, class of 2020 at the GSB. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Started selling Snickers when I was in middle school and sneakers when I was in high school, and it's only snowballed from there. And then after a couple of my best friends dropped out of high school because they fell really far behind in math, I started tutoring kids in math. And my freshman year in undergrad, I ended up founding a nonprofit called Learn Fresh. And we partnered with the NBA and made a fun math game for elementary and middle school students that's kind of centered around basketball and the statistics around basketball. And so I ran that organization for 7 years and then was kind of plateauing in my personal learning at the same time while the organization was finally sustainable. And so that's what kind of prompted me to come back to business school. And yeah, really excited to be with you here today.
Thank you.
That's awesome, Khalil. So I'm Dima. I'm calling in from Beirut, which is where I'm from. So it's 2 a.m. here. It's kind of a testament to how much I care about this community and giving back. Before school, I worked at the United Nations Development Program here in Beirut, mainly working with women and youth and to help them get jobs and advance in their careers. And I was working mainly with the private sector, so all the funding was coming from private companies. And I thought at that time, all the actual decision making is coming from where this funding is. So I wanted to join that side of the table, work on social impact from the private sector side. And I thought the MBA would be a perfect thing to do at that time. And I stand by my decision. Right now, I'm working on a startup in the professional coaching space. So I'm working on a career companion platform to help millennials find more meaningful careers. And I can talk more about how I transitioned from the United Nations to that in a bit.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Yvonne, MBA 2019. I come from the social sector. I did community organizing right out of college in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that had the highest, it had the highest rate of violence in New York at the time, and crime, and a lot of it was due to the unemployment rate after the 2008 financial crisis. And so I learned that, oh man, I have a lot of leadership skills I need to gain in this work and work with people. And so right after that, I went into teaching. I did Teach for America for 2 years, learned a lot of social emotional skills from working with 36 different personalities in the classroom and all different types of teachers and instructional leaders. After Teach for America, I wanted to work at an even higher level to scale my impact. And so I worked as a school administrator, director of data for 3 charter schools in Brooklyn. And after that, transitioned to the MBA because I was wondering what the private sector is all about.
Great, thank you for sharing your journey. Mackenzie.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Mackenzie, and I am the only current student here on the panel. So excited to answer any questions because I am in the thick of it. So I grew up in the Seattle area, so definitely a West Coast girl. I went to Washington University in St. Louis for undergrad. Kind of knew I wanted to be in the nonprofit social sector. And so right after school, I went and I got a Fulbright fellowship, and I went to Indonesia, where I was teaching English there. I ended up doing that for 2 years. Loved it. It was an amazing experience. And then kind of came back and was like, okay, now what? So I first started working, did like a 1.5 years at a small kind of boutique consulting firm doing market research, which was cool, but it just wasn't like my passion. I wasn't like that excited about it. So I switched and started working for PATH, which is a large global health nonprofit in Seattle. And I was in a variety of roles there, but was mostly focused on the strategic partnerships and philanthropy. So I was doing a lot of fundraising, and most of my time was spent kind of on the operations side. So managing all the donor database and the forecasting and revenue, and kind of looking at all the operations side. And so at some point I kind of was figuring I'd go back to school for something, and was looking at both an MPA, a Master's in Public Administration, and an MBA. And ultimately realized that for me, I think I looked at the course listings for both, and the MPA, I realized that like I already knew all the things. Like I already had so much experience with everything I would learn in an MPA program, but the MBA program was actually what I wanted to learn. And so that's kind of how I shifted to get looking at an MBA program, and I've loved it. And so I'm here. I've just finished my first year last week, and I just started my summer internship yesterday. So definitely lots to talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, especially when work has just begun. I am going to stop sharing my screen now so we can really focus on just being together and being present. Many of you kind of already hinted at answers to the first question I had for all of you. And I think Mackenzie really did a pretty detailed job of explaining, when you're thinking about the MBA, but you were also considering other degrees. So certainly coming from a pathway or a background professionally that wouldn't necessarily kind of scream obvious answer, MBA is in my future. I'm wondering if maybe one or two of you could also share a little bit more about that decision-making process for you, deciding that an MBA was the right degree as opposed to some other graduate program, or maybe just continuing to work in a different way. So thank you, Mackenzie, for sharing your perspective. I'm wondering if one of two of you want to elaborate a little bit on kind of your journey to getting to the, yes, an MBA is right for me decision.
I can go ahead and answer that. For me, the other option was going into international development or economics. And I really thought that this would be a path for me. I was in love with development and love with helping vulnerable communities around Lebanon. But I realized, especially after researching the GSB in particular, that I would get an education that's about me as a whole human, and it was develop me and my leadership skills as a whole human, and not only the quant skills or the financial skills or everything that is typically thought of as an MBA. And this is what I came to understand while talking to people who went to the GSB. I didn't know that before. My assumption was that, okay, you go into something that banking or consulting or things like that. And I learned that I can get the skills that I want as a person through an MBA rather than having this very particular focus on international development. So that's my thought process on it.
Great, thank you. Khalil, Yvonne, anything to add there if your journey was a little bit different getting to that conclusion?
Sure, yeah, I guess for me, I started my first real company freshman year in undergrad, and I knew nothing about the world and nothing about entrepreneurship and nothing about leadership, and made all the mistakes that a first-time founder would make. And then as I started to go deeper down that path, when a lot of my friends from undergrad were going into consulting or banking and kind of building those core business skill sets, when I was still kind of trying to fumbling through learning how to fly the plane while building it. After a certain point in time, I felt as though I was just kind of hitting a plateau in terms of what I could learn fully on my own, right? And I'm kind of, I would read a lot and I try to gain as many mentors as possible to learn directly from them. But I really started to yearn for a laboratory-like environment where I could truly just work on myself and not always have to, and almost have the consequences be a little bit lower for a little bit so that I could actually get better. Because I was realizing some of the real world consequences to not being a great leader, not being a great manager. And so that's what kind of sparked the journey to start thinking about grad school in general. I was actually considering PhD programs in education. The Stanford in particular has a really awesome learning sciences and technology design program that's kind of at the intersection of education and CS and all kinds of really interesting things. And so for me, it was between an MBA and that PhD program. And I realized that the leadership specific kind of skills I wouldn't necessarily get in that PhD setting. And then the deeper that I got into the Masters in Ed MBA, it kind of seemed like the perfect marriage of both for me. And so that's what led me to apply.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, now seems like a great time to dive into some of the questions we're seeing from the group today. And Shivam has our first question, and they're wondering, looking back, what was one of the biggest misconceptions you had upon entering the GSB? So whether that was about misconceptions about MBAs in general, or maybe about the Stanford Business School, was there any kind of idea or concept that you thought or were expecting from the experience that either that didn't really play out the way you thought it might? So kind of open to whoever can think of anything.
I can start. I would say, and it's built off the previous points, but I was expecting it to be much more quantitative, much more hard business skills, and have been very pleasantly surprised at the soft skills and the leadership opportunities and the leadership development and those opportunities. I think that's been probably the biggest kind of misconception that I had going in, and have loved all the opportunities I've had.
I would say that my misconception going in was that a lot of the community, the courses, the clubs would be focused around entrepreneurship. And I realized that there are a lot of courses, clubs, and members in the community who can fire you into and charge you off and ready you for the traditional areas in the private world. And they can be so supportive. And it feels awesome to be in the more traditional part of the private world and feels supported by the alumni community while here.
Excellent. Well, Khalil, did you have anything to add there?
I was just going to say an interesting, almost corollary to that was that I was worried that I was going to be just a complete loner at the GSB, that no one else was going to come from this. I didn't even have the language to talk to classify it as a non-traditional background, but I thought I'd be, maybe one of five. And it turns out there's a lot of us. And so I very quickly, found my tribe and also built really amazing relationships through all kinds of GSB experiences, whether it's GSTs or different classes with people that I wouldn't necessarily have met in any other kind of walks of life. But I was worried I wouldn't be able to find that group, and I did very quickly.
Thank you so much for sharing that particular perspective, because that actually leads us into a question that we had from Keith. So Keith is recognizing that for a lot of people that might be coming from the nonprofit space or education space, you may not necessarily have had the same quant exposure, either in your academic background or in your previous work experience before starting the MBA. So as you're thinking about your application, he's wondering if, what indicators, or did you do anything in terms of how you highlighted what kind of quant readiness you might have? Did you do that in the application, or did you take any time to do any sort of preparatory work yourself personally before starting the program? Especially if you felt like, Khalil, you were saying, like, I'm not sure I'm going to necessarily be in the same place where everyone else is at the point of arrival. So maybe folks can focus a little bit on that quant side, because it sounds like that might be on people's minds right now.
I can answer that. I think for me, I didn't do any preparatory work or think about this a lot before. I just thought I'll just dive deep and try to figure it out. And what surprised me is how supportive the community was. I felt like Khalil, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's going to be very hard. I only work on projects on the ground. I don't know how to do this, but every time I needed help in anything quant related, in all of the first few classes, accounting and other very Excel heavy classes, you always have people who are very supportive. So it kind of reassured me in the first 3-4 weeks that it's going to be okay, even if I didn't have such a strong quant background.
Two things I did was when I decided to work as a school administrator, I wanted to work in a functional role that would allow me to boost my analytical skills. So I did a lot of Excel and coding in that position. That's one thing. The second thing is I took online courses in economics, accounting, and finance. That helped.
Great, thank you both. So both Pav and Story have some questions related to the career support. And I love any opportunity to highlight the amazing work that our Career Management Center does with our students. So they are wondering, and I'll try to capture both of their questions. They're wondering if any of you can share some more about the GSB's career support system, and particularly whether it's for, and this may vary for each of you, so support that they can help for anyone interested in education or in nonprofit, or for those that are actually interested in pivoting into sort of the private sector. So I know Yvonne and Mackenzie, you have a little more experience where you're actually maybe transitioning out of that space into something very different. So maybe a couple of you can share a little bit about your personal experiences with the career support that you've gotten at the GSB.
So quickly, I'm sure there's a chart that they could probably find and send in the chat in like 5 seconds, because there are like magical people like that. But there's this chart that shows where people actually found their jobs, whether it's through on-campus recruiting, through direct relationships with their fellow peers and GSBers, and how helpful the CMC was. I found the CMC really helpful to almost just talk through what I wanted, not necessarily like the search itself. I didn't get connected to my current employer through the CMC, but the CMC helped in like a lot of one-on-one sessions, helped me kind of just disentangle like all the different things that were going on in my mind and kind of create my personal criteria. But I mean, you'll hear 1,000 times how amazing the network is, and as many times as you hear it, it's still undersold how incredible the network is. And so that I actually ended up finding my current role, where I'm a co-founder of a new venture studio where we're building startups from scratch and funding them. I found that role through a connection directly from a professor who I got really close to at the GSB. And so kind of something that might not be on the pie chart, but another one for me.
Yeah, and my experience has been a little bit atypical, I would say. So everything was virtual for us, especially in the fall as all that kind of recruiting was ramping up. But I found they did a bunch of virtual like reflection sessions. I think that's kind of what you're alluding to, Will. And I loved those. I found them really helpful. I would say you had to like kind of see that they were happening and like make sure you like made it happen. I know a lot of people who didn't go, and then like in the spring they like heard that these sessions had happened and they were great, and they were like, oh, I missed that. And so kind of staying on top of those opportunities is important. I'm really glad I went to those, and I felt like going into the recruiting season I had a really clear idea of what I wanted, and then it was just about finding and matching to that opportunity. And so I met with a career advisor a couple of times. I think, again, in a virtual world, it wasn't just like I could drop into somebody's office, and I wouldn't say I developed like a close relationship with anybody yet. But I would say they were really helpful, and kind of, you know, when I needed to chat with somebody and bounce some ideas off them, that was really useful. And then I would just say like the career page and just like all the job board, I guess, that was extremely useful to me. And I just set up like a little alert. And so anytime with like keywords for what I was interested in, and I'd get emails every morning. And then I think I started my internship search in like February. So I didn't, like everybody else was doing it like all winter, and I did not, because I was more interested in the startup space. So my search was a little bit later. And then once I was like actually kind of in that mode, then I did meet with a career advisor again and kind of got a little bit more help and, you know, direction, and then was able to land a great role for the summer. So I've found their, like, especially their reflection sessions very useful.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Yvonne, I'd love to hear from you, because you shared that you came from an education background, and I know you're doing something a little different these days. So can you share a little bit about what that transition was like for you?
Yeah, of course. So I work at JP Morgan now, and I just finished a rotational program and placed full-time into the company, doing strategy and analytics work. That is not the kind of work I did before business school. And so it was the skills I focused on a lot while at business school. CMC helped me figure out where in the private world I would like to go to: tech, VC, banking. The options seemed so many, and I felt overwhelmed. But they helped me take it slow, figure out, okay, of these are the skills that they're looking for. These are the type of interests that you may need to have. And they just helped me think about it in a really structured and clear manner. And I felt incredibly cared for throughout the process, because they followed up with me consistently throughout my time at the GSB. And when someone follows up with you as much as they did, you know that I don't know, I felt really sincerely cared for. And that's my favorite feeling from working with CMC to help me find a job.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Like I said, I love any opportunity to talk about the work that that group does. I think the advisors are just so generous with their time, and they do. They stay in touch, they follow up, and they do genuinely care and want to help everyone find what it is that they want to do next. Some people come in with a really clear idea, and for others, it really is a time of exploration for you at business school. And that exploration is encouraged and then guided and supported by people like the CMC advisors on campus. All right, thank you for talking about careers for a minute. We're going to switch gears and talk about academics. So Story is interested in whether or not anyone pursued a joint or dual degree, or if you took any other classes elsewhere on the Stanford campus. So Khalil, you are our resident joint degree student, so I'll have you speak about that. And then I'm wondering if any of the rest of you could share maybe any of the other across the street classes you have taken or maybe plan to take in the next year.
Great. Yeah, so as I've already stated, I did a master's in ed along with my MBA. The way that joint program works is you can actually complete both in 2 years, or you can extend it for an additional quarter. I opted to extend it for an additional quarter, and I'm really glad I did. It kind of gave me a little bit more breathing room, and I felt like I didn't have to either take a ton of classes every quarter or leave without taking some of the classes that I really wanted to, specifically at the ed school, because the first year is more MBA focused. I did my undergraduate degree in education and social entrepreneurship. And so I came in with a fairly strong, both academic and real world background in education. And so that allowed me to, I think, kind of not necessarily explicitly like skip mandatory classes to go to some of the advanced ones, but when I was able to just open it up to more elective based education classes, the GSE is phenomenal. And I actually think one of the kind of like an under the radar gem at Stanford. It's an education school, and so the professors are amazing and have tremendous pedagogy and really care about their students. And so, yeah, I love that joint experience. I also just really practically, some people may dislike this, but I actually really liked finishing in a kind of like off cycle in December, because it felt like I was just able to, when the madness of graduation was upon us and everyone felt like they were leaving, I kind of was able to take solace that I didn't have to get kicked out of the GSB or kicked out of Stanford, and I can kind of stay around for a little bit longer. Yeah, happy to answer any more specifics about the MBA program, but that's kind of the overview. I really enjoyed it. If there's one piece of feedback on the joint program, I think that, yeah, there's some interesting things about I had a pretty small cohort. Like we had 12 or 13. And so I'm always beating the drum of trying to get more people to do those joint degrees, because I think they're just wonderful experiences. And in an interdisciplinary world that we live in, I think you can really draw upon both of those things in great ways. And so I want more people to do them.
Great, thanks for that plug. I'll throw in a quick fun fact for the audience that approximately 1 in 5 of our MBAs are pursuing a joint or dual degree of some kind. But I think the numbers are sort of off the charts when it comes to people who are just sort of dabbling and exploring different interests across campus, where it's something that's like almost everyone, like 80% or higher will take at least one class somewhere else at some point during their MBA experience. For the rest of the panel, does anyone want to share maybe a class that they took elsewhere on Stanford's campus and what led you to that decision?
Yvonne, you want to go?
No, you should go.
I took a class at the design school, so design thinking, and I loved it because when you're at the GSB, you're sort of surrounded by GSBers all the time. You're in the GSB mindset, you live across your classes, you don't explore the rest of campus. So even like walking these 10 minutes from the GSB campus to the design school was really helpful in exploring. But the class itself, I thought was fascinating because we worked in group projects and every person in the group was from a different school. So that was very helpful for me to see like how others are thinking, how if I want to like build a startup, which I was in that mindset, how I can bring on different expertise, different types of people, diverse people into my team, just to be able to produce like better results and have a better team overall. I think the professors, especially at the design schools, they get you way outside of your comfort zone. You do projects, you put yourself out there, you do research on the field. Like we went to McDonald's for our research, like almost on a daily basis, which was kind of random, but it was very interesting to be in a very diverse crowd. And the professors really did a great job at putting us out there and like outside of our comfort zone. So I'd highly recommend that. Anything in the design school honestly sounds awesome.
One of the biggest things that drew me to Stanford is the number of experiential courses that it offers at the GSB particularly. And so if I was going to use my few credits to, because I also actually did a joint degree with the Harvard MPA program. So if I was going to use my few credits to do a cross the street class, I wanted it to be even more experiential if possible. And I was thinking, what offers that? And it happened to be design thinking, just like Dima has suggested. And so I did the Design Thinking Summer Institute. I think it was a week or 2 weeks before the GSB classes started. And it's still in my bones how experiential that course was. And the design thinking principles are still like tattooed into my brain because I don't know, it was a powerful experience. So I definitely recommend looking into that if you want to.
Awesome. Well, speaking of powerful experiences, what a perfect segue to get to Sayeli's question. And I'll give folks a second to think about this one, but jump in as something comes to mind. What do you think is the most mind-shifting or new experience that you have had at the GSB? So it sounds like that class certainly was quite memorable and continues to be informative to you. Were there other either academic or social activities or something else that happened? Maybe it was something that happened during an internship, something that was really pivotal for you.
I'll be the first to talk about touchy-feely. I don't know if all four are, but you may have heard of this class, colloquially called touchy-feely, technically called Interpersonal Dynamics. People talk about it as like a life-changing class, and it truly was that for me. So the structure of the class is that you're in a small group of about 12 people, and you meet for like 6 hours once a week, or maybe even longer than that, like 6 or 8 hours once a week, and just talk about your feelings and the relationships that you're building within that group. And you learn so much. I learned so much about myself, about how I'm perceived by others. I cried like a dozen times. I unlocked all kinds of like memories. Like it was almost like therapeutic in a way. But I also went through it, and I did the readings with my partner. And that was a really powerful way to kind of bring her into the GSB experience a little bit and build shared language that we now use on a daily or weekly basis in our relationship. And so touchy-feely was definitely mind-bending for me.
Mine would be that plus the Arbuckle Leadership Fellows Program, which is a program that you start doing in your second year for the fall and winter quarters, where you're basically taught how to be a coach, and you become a coach for 9 MBA ones. And for me, that was transformative, one, because I now have a career in coaching. So it was the basis of that. I've never heard of coaching before. It's not anything that I was exposed to in Lebanon or in the Middle East. And when I saw how supportive my coaching cohort was, and how great the feedback was from the people I was coaching, I thought that would be something that I want to do full time, because I see how much it has impacted people and it has impacted me. And I think it gives me sort of the self fulfillment of like, okay, I'm empowering other people to be their best selves. And I had never heard about this concept before. I learned it in my second year, and I applied to it because my friend told me like 2 days before the application deadline, like, oh, there's this program, you should apply to it. I'm like, cool, sounds awesome, never heard of it, let me just apply it. This is like, for me, most of my GSB experiences, like someone is telling me 2 days before something that I should submit an application. And it's very transformative. It was very transformative for me to have that impact on other people, and to like Khalil said, you discover yourself in a much more holistic way when you're being coached by executive coaches who usually cost like thousands of dollars per month, and you just get that experience at the GSB.
Thank you. So I know a lot of the examples shared were from our electives. So Mackenzie, I know you haven't gotten to dive into electives too much at this point. As a first-year student, you're grounded in a lot of those core required classes, but you get to kind of pick and choose here and there. Reflecting back on your first-year academic experience, were there any kind of key takeaways, either from one of your core classes or one of your other kind of academic experiences or guest speakers, or something that you're kind of still holding on to, the way of on, maybe it's not tattooed, but maybe it's still something that kind of pops up in your mind from time to time?
I've been racking my brain trying to think about this. I think it's hard because I'm like still like in the midst, and so it's hard to kind of really reflect. Actually, one of my like first project for my internship, they want me to kind of reflect on my year and like see what kind of takeaways I've had from my classes that I can apply to the startup and things that I've learned. So that's actually something I'm going to work on tomorrow. I took a class called People Operations from Startup to Scale Up that I just like happened upon in winter quarter. It was really like one of my first electives that I was able to choose, and I loved it. I just like really fell in love with the professor, and like just, we were also taking all the core classes, which are fine, but like this one was just like so much better in comparison. And I think this one was really cool because of the guest speakers, and almost every class we had some high profile or not, usually a startup founder come and speak. And that's probably the thing that I've realized and has been really cool for me at Stanford, is just like the access you have and the people you get to meet, and the fireside chats with like the founder of this company and this and that. Like, I mean, it's just wild, the number of like opportunities that you have. And I think that has been probably one of the perks of the pandemic, and a silver lining is I think those opportunities have, like, I guess, is that they've just like completely magnified and tripled in the number, because they don't have to fly anybody in anymore. Everything is on Zoom. And so it's so easy to just get somebody to come for an hour and just Zoom in. And so we can talk to like crazy big name CEOs, CFOs, COOs, like all these different people. And so what I loved in the startup class was these people who were in the middle of, starting their company, or they were, a few years in, and were able to really reflect on that. And I think I took away a lot of learnings from that, which, as I'm looking into going into kind of a, I don't know, Series A startup maybe, and that's what I'm looking at this summer. There's so much learnings I can take from that class. And I'd say that's the one that has like been the most useful in terms of content wise that I'm able to take into my internship. So that has been a great class.
Great, thank you for sharing that perspective. I think it's important for everyone to remember that most of the conversations tend to gravitate towards the electives that stick with people after the second year, but so much can also happen in that first year as well, as you're just getting started. So Yvonne brought this up earlier. I'm going to bring it back to the group now. We've had a few questions in the chat and Q&A about experiential learning at the GSB, specifically as it relates to entrepreneurship and social impact, social innovation. I'm going to also kind of couple this with some other questions we've been seeing about the centers for entrepreneurship and social innovation. So I'm wondering if we have anyone on the panel today who took advantage or participated in any of the activities or resources that either of those centers organize, and if you did any of those experiential kind of learning activities through the centers during your time at the program.
All right, I'll hop in while others think. Short answer is yes and yes. Tons of resources, an abundant amount of resources and classes. I actually, given my undergraduate degree is in social entrepreneurship and education. I was a social entrepreneur, ran a nonprofit, went through lots of different fellowships, Echoing Green, things like that. And so I actually, for my first 6 months on campus, I actually didn't participate in as much of the social entrepreneurship related things. Didn't go to as many of the meetups and all of that. And then I realized that I really missed the kind of like hanging out at the kind of like the Center for Social Entrepreneurship and things like that. And so I took much more advantage of it in my second year. Let's see specific things that I did. There's a handful of classes that are taught by amazing, both professors, like full-time professors, and also lecturers that they bring in for some really quick, short classes, and they're still practitioners. And so they have like a ton of real world lived experience. I participated in a summer, I got a fellowship for a summer program between my second year and my kind of ending autumn quarter to support me in working with a local nonprofit. This was kind of like in the middle of the pandemic. I'd actually started a nonprofit initiative called Gift Card Bank to distribute gift cards to low-income families in need. And so I was working with a local food bank and got a fellowship to do that. And so Stanford can kind of effectively pay you to do social impact work over the summer. I was fortunate to receive the Social Change Leadership Award, which about 12 to 15 people get when they're graduating for work on campus related to social entrepreneurship. And there's also full-time fellowship opportunities post-graduation. And so a couple of my friends have received those fellowships that pay them true full-time, post-business school salaries to run their own socially impactful businesses post-grad. And so a plethora of opportunities for sure.
Great, Khalil, thank you for sharing that. And actually you brought up a really important point, which also I saw surface in the questions, especially considering some folks are going to be coming from education, nonprofit, thinking about business school and knowing that you may be returning to a nonprofit space and you may not be joining JP Morgan right after graduation. Certainly financing the MBA is on a lot of people's minds. And I think you mentioned that through the Social Innovation Center, there are actually opportunities for funding and support both at the internship level and post-grad, as an alum. One thing I just want to mention to the group, because I know not everyone is going into nonprofit here on this panel, but we also have a very generous loan forgiveness program. So I certainly encourage you to check out our website to learn more there. So if you are planning to go back into the nonprofit space, there is a loan forgiveness program through Stanford, because we really do believe that we want people to pursue their passions and pursue the careers that they want, not just the ones they think they have to take. We don't want anyone to make any compromises or sacrifices there. So just wanted to add that point, Khalil, thank you. All right, question from Shri here. How accessible or approachable are professors? And what is the class dynamic like? Is it more collaborative or more competitive? So maybe we can popcorn and one or two of you can take the professor question and another can tackle the community front.
You can tackle the community. Oh, Mackenzie, you're currently in class, so you can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was also going to tackle the community. Definitely, I would say not competitive, very collaborative. I think in the first quarter, I was actually kind of surprised at how many like individual projects I had to do. I had assumed that it was like this school was all group work, but there was a lot of individual work. And then like basically from the winter quarter on, it's just been like a lot of group projects and everybody's like very willing to pitch in and, things happen and things come up and people are just like always helping each other and very, very, very collaborative, not at all competitive. So that has been a big plus. I would say I have heard amazing things about professors and being able to connect with them. I think that was a big downside of the pandemic is that our class just didn't get to really interact with professors. I just have only ever met them over Zoom. And so that has been a big bummer for us. And I have not yet had that experience, but hope to next year. But hopefully the others can answer that one.
Yeah, the professors are awesome. Honestly, most of our classes, we had small group dinners either hosted by one of the students or the professors themselves at their homes, at our homes. So it was a very friendly environment. Most of the professors don't need to teach, have been very successful in their businesses, are there because they truly want to get to know the students and are inspired by the community that is there, and they want to build these communities and these connections. So definitely highly suggest always building a friendship with them because they are there for that as well. They're not there, most of them are not there just to do research or for like other purposes. They're mostly practitioners and want to meet awesome GSBers.
Yeah, I'll just a plus 1,000 to that. I think if there's one thing that I would encourage all GSBers do more of, it's just attend office hours, get to know the professors. They're absolutely amazing. So many of the opportunities that I've received post GSB or even during the GSB came through those relationships. And don't be afraid to ask them for, connections to their network or to help you think through something. Like they really are there for you. On the academic side, just really quickly, I don't know if you all know about Stanford has a grade non-disclosure policy. And so I think that helps a lot to, have it be a little bit more of a collaborative environment. Or I don't even know if it's collaborative versus competitive or if what the right like axes are, but it's like academic stress is not that it's not it exists, but it's I think especially after your first quarter, it's almost impossible to flunk out of the GSB unless you truly don't do anything. You're going to be fine. And so, yeah, that grade non-disclosure policy is awesome, and I took advantage of it.
Yeah, quick point to add in terms of that grade non-disclosure, like you said, it takes some of that pressure off and kind of drives down competition that might exist otherwise. I think also important to just throw out here to everyone, especially for those of you who are concerned about those first quarter classes and the quant work, you will have a designated academic advisor that you will work with during your first year. They're still around in your second year if you want to take advantage, and they will work with you every step of the way as you are navigating those course choices and the like. All right, so we've talked a bit about academics, keeping an eye on the time. we were able to share some favorite memories about favorite academic and classroom experiences. I'm wondering if folks want to jump in with maybe some of your favorite clubs, or I know, Dima, you mentioned, you know, the Arbuckle Leadership Fellow program. Were there other programs like that or clubs, you know, that were really memorable and impactful for you personally during your time in the program?
Does it have to be a club, or can it be an experience in general?
I think it can be an experience.
For me, I know that was post-COVID. We're a lucky class, but the travels were absolutely phenomenal. Every single person from the US or non-US would love to take people to their cities, to their countries. And I thought, for me, I'm in love in learning about different cultures. I organized a trip for 80 classmates who came to Beirut, and that for me was the most fulfilling thing that I did throughout the GSB, because it sort of completed my experience. I felt like the friends I made in class now know a side of me that they couldn't have known if they didn't visit my hometown, and most of them had never been here. So any cultural experience for me at the GSB or while traveling with other classmates was definitely the most memorable thing.
Mackenzie, we certainly hope you will have that opportunity next year. Yvonne.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the memorable experiences for me was, speaking of non-disclosure, there's a writing publication for the GSB called Non-Disclosure, and you get to meet the other people in the community who love writing. And they share about their experiences at the school, they share about experiences beyond the GSB, what brought them to the GSB, their thoughts on current affairs. So you get to learn how your classmates are thinking, what they're feeling, and develop meaningful connections with your classmates while doing so.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm Mackenzie.
Yeah, I can point to two that have been really important to me this year. One is talk. I haven't yet given one, but hope to next year. But that is one night every week, a classmate will prepare like a 30-minute kind of story about their life. And this year, everything has been virtual, so it's been on Zoom, but it's actually been amazing. And it's like by far the most consistently attended event. I don't think I missed a single one all year. And so it's like truly incredible to hear your classmates' life story and to hear kind of what they've been through. And you've got classmates literally from all over the world and with like so many different experiences and backgrounds. And people get very vulnerable, and it's truly incredible. And so that has been an amazing opportunity to hear their stories and just to be part of that. And so I always look forward to talk nights. And then the other one is WIM groups. So this is the Women in Management program. And that is something that you can join starting your winter quarter. And it doesn't have to be just women, but it's a small group of like 8 people. And they pair you with a real facilitator, like a real life coach kind of person. And you meet every other week with your WIM group, and you just talk about all sorts of kind of things on your mind, and setting your values and life goals, and I mean, like we've run the gamut on different topics. And my group has been incredible and like a really important source of just like female friendships and girls girls that I didn't kind of know otherwise. And so this is like yet another kind of circle and very important. And again, we get like very vulnerable in those sessions. And it's just been so important. And to have the facilitator kind of be able to walk your group through that has been amazing. And so that's something that, again, Stanford will pay for. And it's just like a really, really cool part of the experience. And for any women applying, I would highly recommend that you join the women group.
Great. Well, Khalil, why don't you close us out with your memory, and then I'll do some final comments before we wrap up today. But would love to hear some favorite reflections from you.
Reflections on classes, clubs, travel, just all of it. Yeah.
Just if you think back,
yeah.
Are there any of those moments that are tattooed on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, Mackenzie, you mentioned talk, which you reminded me of it. I hadn't thought about talk in a little while. But yeah, giving my talk and the process of writing my talk was yeah, certainly one of the most memorable experiences, and I think changed me in pretty interesting ways. And I did mine over Zoom as well. It was kind of early COVID days, and so that was that. Dima talked about travel a little bit for more kind of maybe casual or fun travel. There's also travel or like global experience requirements as part of the GSB. And so for my GST global study trip, we went to New Zealand and learned all about kind of their agricultural industry and dairy industry. And it was a great chance to meet different people that we all opted into this trip, but we didn't necessarily have like shared professional interests. And so on that trip, I got really close to people that I might not have necessarily gotten close to otherwise. And I think that's one of the amazing things that the GSB does is it kind of, you almost get repotted in all of these different places and build a great community around all those different types of experience that you have. And so that was really fun, from like, watching sheep herders together in the middle of nowhere, New Zealand, to like hanging out in downtown Auckland and sharing meals together. And I made some of my best friends on that trip, actually.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for taking some time today to share your experiences, share your memory. I'm going to share one last thing with the group today, and that is to direct all of you to continue your research, continue to learn more about Stanford by visiting mystanford.mba. You can actually customize this page so you can get alerts about upcoming events that you might be interested, stay up to date on things that are happening around the Stanford community. And speaking of community, thank you so much to our students and alums today for showing this group the strength of our community. Dima, thank you for staying up in the middle of the night for us, showing your dedication to the GSB. That means a lot to us. And I do hope that everyone found this helpful today. Hopefully we were able to answer your questions. And if we weren't, you can reach out to our office and we'll certainly do our best to get those answered later. And again, check out our website. Feel free to join us for as many other events you might be interested in this summer. And just join me in thanking our wonderful panel again for joining us today. Thank you. It was so wonderful to hear your stories. Thank you for sharing your time today. Good night and good morning to you all.